All right, hey guys, it's Pastor Kyle here with Kelly. Just learned that going live makes Kelly feel very nervous, and so here we are in non-live video format to what is that word? To ease your fears, your anxiety.
Making a mess of things.
These people love you, Kelly. It's all right. You don't need to worry. We wanted to touch base with you because we had a technical challenge, difficulty on Sunday morning, which made recording our gathering possible. And in fact, we did do it, and we could post it, but the challenge is that there is no audio. And so it's like, an hour-long miming thing.
Which, it looked great.
Well, I thought about it, right? But we decided against doing that. Although if you're sad about it, you can maybe comment, and then later on we'll do like another mime video just for the sake of appeasing people's need for entertainment, right? It looked amazing. Just trust us.
Yeah.
But we wanted to just touch base because Sunday was a great morning. It was a really important weekend. And so some of us, I know some of you guys follow us online, and I know that a number of you were also away for the long weekend. And it felt like it was too important to just not share it with everyone, right? Yeah. Okay, so our goal here really is not to kind of rehash everything, but I do want to give you some highlights and talk about where we're going because, the main point on Sunday, we were talking about, what's his name? Go, that's right. It was called Go. And I was thinking putting Kelly on the spot here and make her preach it and see if she was really paying attention, right? So who was the person we were talking about in the Bible? Abram, there we go, 10 points for Kelly. And the story that we're looking at is in Genesis chapter 12, where God says to Abram, go. And he doesn't tell him where to go. He says to the land I will show you, like future tense. So he doesn't know already. And he does tell Abram, God tells Abram what to go away from. But in terms of like what he calls him to, it seems vague to Abram. And it seems vague to us. And one of the things that really kind of stood out to me is the fact that this story never stood out to me until like pretty recently, right? Like I've heard it, I've read it before, and maybe you have some thoughts on this, but like in terms of the way that I feel like I've been wired, right? It just seems to me that when we have the information and we've come to some sort of reasoned conclusion, like whether or not we have the full plan, we just start and we just go, right? And so the idea that God would speak to somebody and say, go away from this and go to the place that I will show you. And Abram gets up and goes. I'm like, yeah, right. That makes sense, right? Like it makes a lot of sense to me that would happen because I put myself in Abram's shoes. And I think that I begin to project that onto all of the people around me, right? I have a spiritual director. And so I was sharing this story with him about, my story, how I actually began university in biological chemistry, felt like God was telling me that wasn't for me, and I prayed about what he wanted me to do, and he didn't really say. But I just knew it wasn't that, right? And so I switched from biological chemistry to theater. And I knew at the time that it was a big deal, right? Like, and I wanted to make as drastic a switch as I possibly could.
It's a big 180.
I see that in retrospect. But, like he's like, I'm telling him this story, and he's like, hold up, what? Say that again? And I had to tell him again, right? And he's like, so you were in science, and you switched to theater, and then he said, in your words, because it was killing your soul. I said, yes. He said, and you didn't know what you were going to do. I said, no. He said, Kyle, like, people don't work like that. He said, you're a unicorn, right? And I never really thought of it in that light. And I think of the story of Abram in the same way, that, it just makes sense to me. That, like, Abram doesn't need to know the destination. He just needs to know that it's God speaking in the first place. And he said, go away from these things. And the things that he says go away from are, basically security. Things that would hold him back from maybe following God in the future, right? So there's like inheritance, which is economic security, and his identity in his tribe and his country and this group that he's always been a part of. He says, go away from that to the place that I will show you.
And they weren't bad things that
No.
he was telling him to go away from.
No.
So.
No.
Yeah.
None of those things that God told Abram to leave were bad things at all. Like, it's not bad to have economic security.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad to have, personal security in a group, or to have an identity that includes where you're from. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. And we began to talk about, like, our main point was just, if God says go, go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, when God says go, go. Whether or not we have that full picture. And the reason that we're able to do that is because we also trust that He's sovereign. Right? That if we go in the wrong direction and we're in this place of being faithful to God and doing what we believe He's asking us to do, and maybe so far all of that has just been, don't stay where you are. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That God is actually big enough to pick us up and turn us around if we end up heading in the wrong direction, right? And so, we just shared about a few of the things that have happened. And, even though change can be hard, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. And change can take courage, but when God says go, we go, right?
Yes.
So we talked about, some of the changes that have happened over the last number of months. And, we just finished our summer series, which I think went all right.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It was called The Good Place, and if you haven't checked it out, you can on cornerstonelively.com, but you know that because you're watching this already. So we talked about what happens after we die and these near-death experiences and what people have said from all around the world and how that actually lines up with what the Bible has to say. But the way that we did that, we did it in the evening instead of in the morning, and we had these free family barbecues every single Sunday during the summertime, and just there was a lot different. And I feel similar to Abram, that some of the things that God began to say go and do something here in our community at Cornerstone, those things that were happening before weren't bad. Right? Like it wasn't an unhealthy place. God wasn't saying you got to turn from your evil ways. Like that's not the position. I don't think so.
No.
Maybe your input could add there. I don't think that there was
anything wrong with 10 a.m. Sunday services.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So it wasn't bad, but we felt like God was beginning to call us to something new, and so we took this step of faith. And honestly, I didn't know how it was going to go. Right? It's kind of crazy, and I learned that from people's reactions when we shared them, shared the idea. But like we just wanted to celebrate the summer this Sunday and talk about how many people are now plugged into Alpha, right? And how many people are feeling safe who maybe haven't felt safe to be in a church for decades because of some sort of hurt, right? Some sort of negative experience. And they're plugging in, and 8 people decided to say yes to Jesus for the first time in the last 2 months during our summer, right? Which is amazing. And Kelly shared a little bit about kids ministry and how typically during the summer that kind of dwindles,
declines,
right?
Yeah. I mean, usually people go away, and we see a decrease in our numbers in Sunday school. But actually, this summer our numbers have increased.
Right.
And it's not just families visiting one-off. Like, oh, we'll just see what it's like because there's free food, and
right.
But we're seeing an increase.
Or they're at camp, and their camp is here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, our last class that we had. Prior to this past Sunday was 16 kids, and actually this past Sunday that we just had, we had 11 kids.
Right.
So, I mean, that's big.
Yeah.
That's big for us. We're growing, and it's amazing.
And 11 kids is big because it was Labor Day weekend.
And not everybody was there.
Yeah.
There was at least half a dozen other kids that are part of our Cornerstone family that just weren't there because they were away.
Sure.
Celebrating the last hurrah of summer, I suppose you
could
say.
Yeah.
But speaking to your point on change, another thing we did this summer was Camp Cornerstone.
Right.
And so there were a number of aspects that we kept the same throughout camp.
Dr. Funky.
Dr. Funky was a part of it, absolutely.
Yeah.
The kit car races, those are always huge. But we changed a bit of the format. We used to have 4 stations and 3 large teams, and the teams were based on kids' ages.
Uh-huh.
But this year, I felt really called to change that. I felt like the bigger teams, 10 to 15 kids, was becoming a bit unmanageable, really, in terms of, the whole point is that we want to develop relationships with the children that come and really help point them towards Jesus and show them God's love. And when you're just managing 15 5-year-olds, it becomes difficult.
Yes.
So we changed it up a bit. We did 6 smaller teams. The largest team was 7 kids, and we had 6 different stations. So we added more stations. We had 6 teams. The teams were mixed aged, which was a bit of an experiment, but it went so well. Right. And so, it was change. It was different outside of the norm that we've normally done, but I felt called to do it, and I just felt like, we're going to give it a try. I feel like this is God's leading.
Sure.
And we did it, and it was fantastic. We had 37 kids registered for camp.
Right.
And we had a great week.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing.
So it's really exciting, and I was thinking about how exciting it is to just be a part of what God is doing in our community, and there's a certain amount of courage I feel like it took to start to make changes because it's different from the way things have been done, right? But now that we've stepped into that, at least we've begun to step into that, right? And I don't really feel like there's any going back, right? Like this idea of, like, we are meeting in the mornings now. Like, during the school year, it works better, right, to meet on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. So that's what we're doing. And but just this idea of kind of returning to status quo, right? And status quo was never bad. It was healthy. Good things were happening, right? But there is this extra sense of excitement right now, and people coming to make decisions for Jesus, and getting plugged into alpha groups, right? And having conversations. And so we're so excited about those things that are happening, right? So at youth this fall, they're going to be doing alpha at senior high. We have several alpha groups that are kicking off the week of September 16th, right? One of them is at the church, but all of the rest are not. They're in people's homes. We have a few spots left for people to sign up. We have a lot of people who are already plugged in, but many kind of times during the week, many different locations, most of them in Lively, some of them not in Lively. And so you could go to our website, cornerstonelively.com/alpha, and plug in, because, one of our values is that circles are better than rows, right? And life change happens in circles, right? And to be able to sit down and to have conversations and to ask questions, right? Like I've got a friend who says that one of the things that he's not a fan of about church is this idea that you just have to sit and listen, right? And so, he's just naturally a questioner, right? And that's okay, and that's a good thing. And, we've begun to kind of work through what that looks like in our gatherings, because we don't want to just ignore that about how people are wired, right? So we've got wrap-up Sundays, and if you have a question, you just send it to us. And then at the end of every series, that's what we talk about, right? The questions that people have asked, right? But, within that context of a small group where it's just like you're sharing your ideas and your thoughts and asking questions and having conversations, there is none of that, like, just listen to one person speak and they tell you what's right. Not that, I hope that's not what it feels like on, in our family gatherings, but at least there's that stigma, perhaps, that within the context of a small group, whether you come on a Sunday or not, you get to have that experience of having a conversation, right? So we're really excited about that, and hoping that we actually have more people plugged into small groups than we have attending on Sundays. Not because we want less people on Sundays, right? So if you're hearing this, don't just stop coming. But come and bring a friend for Alpha, which is this amazing opportunity to ask like these massive big questions, right? And it always involves free food, watching a video. There's no judgment, there's no follow-up, there's no pressure, there's no cost, there's no obligation. It really is just, come and be yourself. And so we're, excited about that. And then there's something happening for Kids Min, right, coming up soon.
So we are redeveloping the nursery room. It's exciting. We're going to be repainting it, putting in some new furniture, getting some new supplies, redoing the bathroom as well a little bit. And we're going to be staffing it again. As of the last few years, we haven't had any staff members in there, people sitting in there on a Sunday morning to help. So we're going to have that now. And so if you are a new parent with a little one, 0 to 18 months, we're going to have a room dedicated to you where you can bring your little ones, and we are going to have baby cuddlers. And yeah, so you're gonna feel hopefully comfortable and able to sit inside the worship and yeah.
Sit inside the worship.
Sit inside the worship.
What does that mean?
Sit inside the service and be able to worship, knowing that your little one is being taken care of well.
Right. Yeah, I knew what you meant. But I'm just pushing back a little bit, because that's kind of like a church thing to say, right? And
like
imagine,
too churchy?
Yeah, a little bit. Because imagine like you walk into an environment that's like just completely foreign to you, right? Like there are people watching right now that aren't plugged into a church or they didn't grow up.
Churchese.
They didn't grow up in a church, and we really try not to speak churchese, right? But it's okay. We forgive you. But imagine like reading a book on theoretical physics and not having a glossary, right? Like if you have no experience with that topic or that language, right, and not being able to define anything, like it's just overwhelming, right? And so I feel like maybe there's some people watching this right now who feel like that, right? So that's why I'm pushing back. It's okay. They forgive you. If they don't, they'll send an email, So, guys, one of the things that I think is super important about, what's going on right now is this idea of stewarding growth, right? Like, again, there's another church word. It's not actually a church word, but it's a word that the church started using. So a steward was actually like from Middle English, like the middle of the 1500s area, right, of time, and it was the person who was responsible for managing all of the property for the lord of the kingdom, right? So there'd be like the lord in the biggest castle, right? And then the steward had all of the administrative responsibilities, right? Like dealing with the people who worked the land and taxes and management. And he got to be in the second biggest castle as somebody who enjoyed the perks of being the steward, but he also understood the whole time that it's like none of it is his, right? It all belongs to the Lord, right? Which, we're not talking about Jesus right now. We're talking about like the guy in charge of the land, right? And so there we go. So the whole idea of like, how are we responsible with, the growing sense here of, people at Cornerstone, right? And I believe that in order to be kind of responsible with that is that we need to step up to the plate and serve, right? And with a growing kids ministry, it means that there is a growing need for investing in our kids, right? And so I shared on Sunday how apparently we don't have a plan to have people serve just once every... Oh, hey, Graham. It's one of our kids here, or Kelly's son, Graham.
Thank you. Okay.
It's an amazing photo here that he just drew. So we don't have a plan in place for you to serve for 25 minutes once every 37 weeks, right? That's not how it works. But we do believe that we have opportunities to build into the life of kids in our community and families in our community and impact their future forever, right? And that's actually worth making a sacrifice for, right? And so we are looking for people to step up to the plate and serve, because there is this sense that it would be irresponsible of God. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it would be irresponsible of God to continue to send more for us to just allow people to fall through the cracks and not be served well with excellence and to be loved, right? And so we did kind of chat about that on Sunday. And so if you are somebody who calls Cornerstone home, and you're not currently serving, part of our next steps is to actually step up and say, I'm willing to help. And maybe for you, that's not kids ministry, right? But there are other areas that there are needs that everybody can serve. There is a spot for everyone. And I actually believe that as we serve, that we grow the most, right? That we've been designed to serve and give back, and that there's a lot of growth that happens there, right? Last thing that we need to chat about was just where we're going this fall in terms of teaching, right? And so this coming Sunday, we're starting a series called The Book, right? I've sat in my office a few times over the last number of weeks of people who are brand new to faith or just beginning to ask questions, and they're saying like, I want to follow Jesus, I want to say yes, I want to trust him, I don't know how to determine what voices in my life are speaking truth and what voices in my life are leading me to places that are unhealthy, and how do I know? So I shared this illustration of being able to determine what is true. When I was in high school, I worked at Staples, and somebody tried to pay for an item with a counterfeit $10 bill. And the only reason the cashier was able to identify that this was not true, that it was counterfeit, was because she knew what the real thing was, right? And so we're going to have just a series of conversations about the book, about the Bible, which is the best-selling book of all time, right? And that's just a statistical thing. Whether or not people are reading it or it's just sitting on their shelf, their family Bible, it's the best-selling book of all time. The phrase Bible study how-to has more than 500,000 unique searches on YouTube every month in just the United States. And then more than 50,000, it might have been 60, but at least 50,000 unique searches on Google for that same phrase, right? So it's the best-selling book. It's the most widely distributed book worldwide of all time. Yet there are so many questions of, like, what about apparent contradictions? And what's the deal with different translations? And how do I interpret this? This doesn't make sense. I had a meeting with somebody today. They're like, somebody gave me 20 years ago a King James version of the Bible, and I decided to try to read it, and after 2 pages, I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And it actually created so much confusion. He's like, I think it might have been a part of what made me not want to pursue any church thing. Right? He thought this is just what it's like, right? And so, we do believe that the Bible has this incredible power to speak into our lives and change us in an amazing way. But how do we overcome those obstacles and those barriers, right? One of the weeks we're going to be talking about, can we trust the Bible? Right? How do we know it's not just some guy who made it up, a couple hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago, and he's laughing in his grave thinking he's pulled off the most amazing prank of all time, right? So we're going to talk about that. How do we interpret the Bible, right? If you and I were to have a conversation and there was a transcript of it, and we had some cultural phrases or, just some cultural phrases, or we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then 2,000 years later, somebody reads that transcript. They might think Kelly's saying, talking about where she is geographically, right? But we need to understand the context. And so how do we actually interpret correctly? What are those methods that we can apply to be able not only to know how to do it, but to be equipped in order to do that well for the rest of our lives, right? So what are those tools that we need, right? So we're going to have that conversation. And so I believe that it's going to be helpful for you, whether you're in a place in life where you're just asking questions, or if you're already a Christian and maybe you've grown up in the church, there's still going to be those nuggets for you to help you study and kind of dig deeper in your spending time in the Bible, right? And gain more from that, become more fruitful or yield more, right? Does that make sense?
There's always something new to learn.
Yes, yeah. You read the same thing 100 times, and on the 100th time, there's you have that experience where man, how did I never see that before? Right? Yeah. It's alive and talking to you, right? And so how do we do that? How do we be as fruitful as possible in that experience? So, quick recap: when God says go, go. Super excited about what's gone on this summer, and super thankful to everybody who made that possible. I mean, you don't even know how many hours were put in by volunteers in order to make this summer happen. And so thankful to God that it's clicking, it's connecting, and we're excited about what's going on and having conversations in our community. So plug in this fall, Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. If there's a Sunday that you miss, I feel like you should follow along on YouTube or follow along on our website and get that information. Plug into a small group, right? Life transformation happens in small groups, and I promise you're not going to be judged. You just be you, right? I'll be me, and I think together we're going to meet Jesus. And so sign up for Alpha, cornerstonelively.com/alpha, and Kelly's doing an amazing job with kids ministry. There's lots of kids, and we need your help in order to be responsible with the kids that are coming, right?
Yeah.
And so we need you to plug in. And so you can contact us through our website again, or you can speak to Kelly directly. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, Kelly@cornerstonelively.com.
Yep.
That's my email address, or you can just pin me down sometime on a Sunday morning.
Right.
And there's positions for the toddler room,
Right.
The nursery room, and even Sunday school if you feel up for going full on and teaching a class. Like we're open. We've got
That's awesome.
We've got openings.
You'd be on a team. You'd be trained, equipped. We've got a kids ministry conference that's coming up that we want to send people to. But that's more. If you have some questions about that, why don't you send us a message and we'll get back to you. But a pin, that's another word. When we talk about like how to interpret a text in the Bible, right? Like we just have these language issues, right? You know the word pin has more than 40 definitions.
Huh.
Right? Like stick a pin in it.
Right.
Like let's pause, right? A pin in terms of like a needle, right? Like you're talking about like making something, right?
Yeah.
There's a rolling pin that you use in the kitchen. There's a wrestling pin, right? You know, and so we have these things that just happen in our language, and because believe it or not, people that are recorded in the Bible didn't speak English. We have these language issues to deal with. So how do we deal with them? Super practical for wherever you're at in your faith, whether you're just asking questions, you're not sure, you think it's a load of baloney, that's all right, come on out. And at least come to this place of understanding why followers of Jesus believe what they believe. And if you are somebody who's already a follower of Jesus, it's going to increase the effectiveness of your time that you're spending reading your Bible, and that's certainly something that's worth doing, I think.
Absolutely.
Right? Cool. Anything else? Do we miss anything?
I don't know.
What are we going to do like as soon as we press stop? Right? It's going to happen. I think we've got it.
I think so.
We think we've got it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, and sorry about the technical issues that have prevented us from sharing our gathering on Sunday. I really hope that it's not going to happen again, but we feel like this was a good way to kind of communicate that information. So I'd love for you to share this, and if you got any questions, why don't you just drop a comment in the section below. If you're watching this on our website, you can't do that. You can send us a form or send us a little email, or click the contact us button. You'll be able to contact us that way. If you're watching on YouTube, and I know that a lot of you do, you just put a comment in the comment section below, and we'll be notified right away, and we can touch base. Cool?
Absolutely.
All right, guys. See you Sunday, 10 a.m.